Kia ora koutou, and welcome back to IMNZ, the virtual leadership series. I'm Tristram Clayton, and we're thrilled so many of you have again decided to join us to listen to and engage with our keynote speakers. This free virtual series, which began 2 weeks ago with 7 outstanding speakers, is all about leadership, about stepping up in difficult times, but it's also about doing more with less and adapting to this fast changing world we all live in. As was the case last week, we have 3 speakers today, all who will speak about leading boldly and being resilient during times of change. In a moment, our first speaker, Lower Hutt Mayor Campbell Barry, but first, I'd like to introduce Susanna Spong from IMNZ, that's the Institute of Management New Zealand, who made this leadership series possible. Susanna, if you could jump back onto the main stage so we can hear a few words for you. There you are. Great. I'll leave it to you for a few words and then I'll jump back on and introduce our first speaker.
Thanks, Tristram. Once again, it's my very great pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of IMNZ to another of our IMNZ Doing More with Less leadership events. IMNZ's been transforming talented Kiwis into great leaders for the past 70 years. And with the current COVID environment, we wanted to play our part in supporting our leaders and managers with tools to help them step up. Once again, I'll be moderating the IMNZ Q&A sessions today. These will come after the speakers' presentations on the main stage. Today we have Q&As with Mayor Campbell Barry and then also with IMNZ leadership expert Nick Predel. Tristram will let you know when those Q&A sessions are coming up and how you can jump over to join those. We'll be holding more IMNZ webinars in the future as well, so we will keep you posted on those, and you can also check out our website imnz.co.nz too. That's all from me for now. See you in the Q&As later this morning, and back to you, Tristram.
Very well put, and as Suzanne said there, she will be moderating those live, our 2 live Q&A sessions, which will follow our first 2 speakers' presentations. Now, all you have to do to find them is click the Sessions tab, that's on the left-hand side of your screen, after the presentations. And once you're there, you can ask questions directly via video or just by chat if you don't feel like broadcasting yourself around the world. Of course, you can just listen in. There's likely to be some really fascinating conversations going on there. Suzanne will be present to help facilitate all the questions. By the way, don't forget to vote in our polls. They're on the right of screen. Once you've voted, you'll be able to see the results as they come in. All right, so let's get on with it. Our first speaker today is Hutt City Mayor Campbell Barry. Campbell was elected mayor at last year's local body elections, and at the age of just 28, was the youngest person ever elected to the office of mayor of a city in New Zealand. Mayor Barry, if you'd like to join me now on the main stage, please. And you will be speaking about how a new or young leader balances their natural leadership style with the needs of their team. It's a fascinating subject. Mayor Barry, over to you.
Ka tangi te titi, ka tangi te kaka, ka tangi huki kohau. Ti hei mauri ora. Kia ora, and thank you for this opportunity to speak with you all. It really is a great privilege, and I hope that it is interesting and helpful. I thought I'd start off by first telling you all a little bit about myself, so a bit about my background and my journey to where I am now as fortunate to be the Mayor Koromatua of Hutt City Council here in Te Awa Kairangi. So a little bit about me. I'm one of 3, 2 siblings, and come really from a working class family. Growing up, probably my earliest memories was Dad doing 60-hour weeks on the wharves in Wellington. When he would get home, Mum would make sure we're all fed and then head off to her cleaning job in the evenings. So we're the sort of family that we didn't have a lot, but we had everything that we needed, and we had parents who always put us first. I was born in the Hutt Hospital, and grew up in Wainuiomata, somewhere which we call the centre of the universe, but where I'm really proud to be from. And it's where I currently live with my wife, Laura, and we've got a little bit of land out there with chickens, alpacas, sheep, and cats and dogs. So hands are full outside of the job. When I look back on my journey and where I am now, it is kind of difficult to pinpoint one thing that sort of led me to where I am. However, there are quite a few different things that I think have helped create that journey and get me into this position anyway. And I think early on, a big part of that was being heavily involved in my local community. So particularly in Wainuiomata, probably like most people, through sport, through my parents, through family and friends at school, I was heavily involved. But as a teenager, when I was about 13, 14, I volunteered for the local newspaper because my goal and dream back then was actually to become a journalist, funnily enough. So I did a lot of writing, and that's always been an interest, and actually is still an interest for me now. But doing that back then, I was able to actually meet a lot of amazing people in my community who do great things, and everyday people that you don't realise who are doing amazing things locally, nationally, and internationally. And I also had some really cool opportunities to interview and people like Tana Umanga, who was a former old boy of my school, Wainuiomata High School, when it was Parkway College, and to talk about his journey going from school, where he had a bit of a tough time at school actually, to then of course become an All Black and a leader in our country. And I think it was those experiences that helped me on, I suppose, a journey of where I am today. In my final year of high school, I was fortunate enough to be a head student, and of course study and sport was really important to me, and I made sure I focused on them. But I quickly set my eyes on actually travel overseas. So I wanted to have a gap year and get out and explore. And I still remember my history teacher actually telling me in that final year that, Campbell, you haven't completed your education until you've travelled, until you've experienced other cultures, until you've seen other customs and how other people live. And that's advice that I share with everyone, actually. I think it's so important. And I think if everyone in the world had the opportunity to travel and see how others live and how they work, we would be a better place overall. So I had a gap year, which was probably the big experience that opened my eyes. The first part of it was actually in the United States during Camp America, and I worked at a foster kids camp called Camp Morty, and that was really a bit of a life-changing experience for me from what I experienced there. And I suppose to give you a bit of context, we had kids there aged from 5 through to 15, and a number of them had never seen a lake before. Simple as that. They'd grown up in concrete jungles just outside of New York City. And we also had a lot of brothers and sisters, family members who either hadn't seen each other for years because they were in the foster care system, or in some cases actually, on one case was a brother and a sister, a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old who met each other for the first time at this camp for a week. And that again was something quite special to be part of, and pretty emotional really actually as well, given that actually they only lived, I think, about half an hour away from each other, but had never seen each other in all those years. And there were two stories actually from that camp that really stuck home for me. And the first one was a young man named Corey, and he was a bit of a tough kid to get to know, didn't open up very much, and it took probably about 4 weeks before he finally started to open up. And he was 10 years old, and he told me about how at birth he was a twin brother, and he was actually left behind at the hospital. So his mum gave birth, decided to only take one and head off, and he was then in the foster care system. When he was 8, he sort of got wondering, he sort of would have got told about that. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but he didn't. He wanted to know more about what had actually happened to his mum and his brother, and there was a lot of resistance in telling him. But eventually he found out that unfortunately his mum was in prison, and his twin brother had passed away when he was about 3 years old, essentially due to neglect in his mum. And it really came down on me like a ton of bricks when he was sharing the story of for one, how fortunate we are back in New Zealand, or that's how I felt at the time, and obviously having a loving family back home. But it was really that experience that I think matured me probably a little bit quicker than my age as an 18-year-old. And I think when I came back, motivated me to say, hey, how can I give back to my local community and get involved? So when I got back to New Zealand after my gap year, I thought, how can we get involved? And also when I opened my eyes, I realized actually the big challenges that we have in our own backyard. And I looked to domestic violence as one example of that. That is massive in our communities, and particularly in the Hutt Valley. Unfortunately, we have some of the highest rates of domestic violence and family violence, and that's something which is that we should all be trying to tackle, and something we shouldn't be proud of for sure. So in 2010, once I was back, there was a local body election, and I stood for the Wainuiomata Community Board. and was fortunate enough to be elected there. I was incredibly green to politics at the time as a 19-year-old, but it was a really good way to get involved with the local community. And 3 years later, a spot became available on council, and I was encouraged to stand there, and I was elected as one of the 2 Wainuiomata ward councillors. I certainly remember back then, I suppose, being in a leadership role, having a bit of an identity crisis. Excuse me. As a young person on council, the youngest ever at the time, how was I supposed to act? Was I meant to be like the rest of the council who were all double my age? Was I meant to be like a politician, how you see people on the TV? How the heck do I do this? And I really did struggle with that for about 6 months until I was able to find a mentor, actually, who gave me some pretty sound advice, really basic advice, but actually really important. And that was essentially be yourself, be authentic, and make sure you stand for something. Otherwise, you fall for everything. So it sounds like common sense, right? But actually, at the time, particularly as a young person, when you're in this environment and you don't have other people who look or seem like you at the table, it is a little bit tricky. So that's something which I've held on to, and made sure I've continued actually in my role as mayor. In 2016, I was re-elected to council, and I felt like I was starting to hit my straps as an elected member, and asking questions, challenging, and really feeling like I was able to contribute at that council level, as well as the involvement which I was already heavily involved in the local community. As I started to do more of that, I actually started to become more frustrated at the way things were being done. Obviously, you had for decades a way of doing things at our council, which had been cemented, and I'm not saying that they were necessarily bad, they were just frustrating and feeling like things weren't changing, or you were hitting brick walls. So I suppose as we headed into 2019, I felt frustrated because we as a council weren't focusing, I felt, on issues like homelessness, transport, building a sustainable environment, our partnership with mana whenua, and also getting some of the basic functions of council right, and thinking long-term into the future. And I felt like that wasn't happening as much as what it could. So I stood for mayor, and that was certainly a big jump and a big call to make. And a lot of people told me I was probably too young, but also people told me I was too young the other times as well. And I stood against a 3-term incumbent who had an 18,000 vote majority in the previous election and managed to win by 2,500 votes. So it was pretty great result and great feeling to get to there. So even though I am a young mayor at 28, and it's something which people obviously identify pretty quickly, I certainly don't feel that young, since I've been involved since 2010. And I'm also starting quite a few grey hairs, so I certainly don't feel young, even though I suppose in comparison I am. So the question that was put to me was around my leadership style and how you apply that to your team, and how they, and given that they may have experienced different leadership styles in the past. And as mayor, I'm really lucky to have such a diverse council. Actually, in Lower Hutt, we've got one of the most diverse councils in New Zealand, a good gender split, as well as really good representation. We've got Māori, 3 Māori councillors, and actually also New Zealand's first Maldivian councillor. So we've got a really good diverse team there to work with. But I'm also obviously working with staff in council and my own mayor's office as well. And I thought for today I'd specifically talk about my team in the office, as I think that's a dynamic that might be more relevant for people who are listening in, and the fact that it's actually the environment that I work in on a day-to-day basis. So I suppose when I think about my leadership style, I do a little bit of reflection on what that is, and ask my team what my leadership style is in preparing for this. But I suppose it's one of being hands-off when I have confidence, and avoiding micromanaging at all costs. And this is important because it's really important to build trust up in your team, and give them space to feel, learn how to do the job for you, work with you, and learn how to make mistakes as well, and knowing that that's okay to be able to do that. As leaders, as managers, we all need to delegate. We know that that's obviously just has to happen. I suppose the more tricky question is how you delegate in that process of checking in. So when I delegate to the team, I really focus on encouraging them to work together on issues and tackle them together. So even though everyone's got defined roles in what they do in the office and in the space out in the community, they're all working together, and there's a lot of crossover, and it's so important for synergies. And what it also means is that I don't need to be involved as much, and it frees up my capacity to focus on tasks that I need to prioritise. And it also means that when I receive advice on an issue, I have real confidence that it is the best advice that I can get, because I know that it's been across a number of eyes and been through a real robust process. And it's really interesting, actually, because I can really notice the difference when a team member, if they've done a piece of work or got some advice and they haven't spoken to others in the team or within council, it's really noticeable because it's just so different. So that's something which I'd really encourage and works. And I suppose it's a little bit of an adjustment for staff who maybe have been in situations where they're managed a bit harder or working in silos. But what I've found is that it really creates openness and a really good positive working environment. So that's been going well so far. So some advice to young leaders out there on how you can balance your leadership style with your team's needs. So some questions that I'd put to you, and because we've put them to ourselves, is what is your team tikanga? What are your shared values? What's your team vision, purpose, and strategic objectives? This is something you can do to get your team to help look at this. So to get your team on board with those, with developing, like I say, that tikanga, is making it really clear about where you're heading and what your goals are to everyone. So it's not always obvious. It might be obvious in your mind with what you want to achieve or what you want to do. It's not always obvious for other people. And of course, finding out what you and your team need from each other. So for example, during my campaign for mayor, I had a vision, and I still have that vision, of course, for Lower Hutt to be the best place in New Zealand to grow up, raise a family and thrive. So that was a really good starting point for us to help develop a vision within our office and how we operate and how we can help achieve that. And now our office vision is that our team are known as courageous and innovative leaders in local government who act with integrity and have the respect and confidence of our community. Quite different, but something we can collectively buy into, and if achieved, it will help make Lower Hutt the best place in New Zealand to grow up, raise a family and thrive. The same can be said about your purpose within a team context. Initially, the team's purpose was to provide me with advice and support. That was basically it, if you look at people's contracts. Now our team is focused on supporting me and leading council and our community toward a progressive city where people are at the heart of everything we do. Again, it's broader, but that's a good thing because, again, it creates collective buy-in and it ensures that everyone is on the same page. So when they're doing any task at all, they can always look back at this and go, okay, so why am I doing this? What is the reason behind this? And how should I be approaching these things? And I think that's really helpful. With this, we were able to actually develop some strategic objectives as a team. And for example, my vision and purpose helped inform 4 strategic objectives that we've got. And I'll go through them really briefly. One, do what we said we're going to do. So make sure that we deliver on our promises, on whether that's on policy or whether that's on follow-up from constituents who come to us. So that's really important. Meet people where they are. So making sure that we're actually going out to communities, engaging with them, being proactive, not just reactive and sitting here waiting for invitations. That's really important. And also leading the conversation. So when we have big issues in the community, one I would identify in the Wellington region is around through water infrastructure. We know the challenges with that. We need to be upfront and honest with our community about what's going on, and actually more information to people is power to people, and transparency is absolutely your friend. So talking about the challenges that we face, the significant bills that are coming, and the need to change the way we're doing things now when it comes to investing in our through water infrastructure is something we've been able to do here at the Hutt. And I think we're seeing more actually of in the region as well as a flow-on effect from that. And the final one is building strong foundations. So building a culture of trust, of openness, of everyone being on an equal footing within the team. And I think that's really, really important for me, because I need to be challenged and I need to be kept in line sometimes. So making sure that everyone always feels comfortable to be able to do that, and having an open door policy. Finally, just on three pieces of advice I would give to young leaders, and then I'd touch on at the end on COVID. The first piece of advice I'd give is what you give your time to matters. In leadership management positions, it is your most valuable commodity. As mayor, everyone wants your time. So what you focus on and what you give your time to truly does matter. And of course, that means you need to spend your time wisely. So for me, I sort of break this into two things. With my team, I'm always wanting to make sure I'm checking in with them, doing welfare checks, seeing how they are, how are things going, because if I'm spending time on building my team, then the team will build. When it comes to policy in regards to my agenda in the Hut and what I want to achieve, whenever we're doing things, whether that be out in the community or focusing on council papers or decisions, I'm always asking myself, why am I spending time on this? Why does it matter? What am I trying to achieve? And as a mayor of a city of 110,000 people, it's very easy to be caught up in the day-to-day things that come up. They're important and they need to be listened to and worked through, but they can't take all your energy and time. Otherwise, you don't have the time for the stuff that matters. So I'm always asking, is this helping us build more affordable homes in our city? Is this helping us find solutions to the growing congestion in our streets? Is this helping support local businesses in response to COVID-19? Is this helping connect people with information, promote transparency and respect? Is it enabling our community organisations out there? So in everything that I do, as much as possible, it's about, hey, how the time that I'm spending on things is actually going towards those priorities that we have. So not getting sidetracked, essentially, I suppose. And I suppose if you spend your time on something that isn't a priority, then also others will spend their time on it as well. And for myself as a mayor, if I see something which isn't particularly important, I don't want to give examples, and I'm spending time on it, the rest of my team will do that as well, and others will do it as well because they will be following. And that means that you then have suddenly a whole team who is focusing their time, which is limited as well, on something which maybe isn't a priority. Two other things. There's one thing, and this is really important for me, the standard you're willing to walk past is the standard you're willing to accept. And this is really important. So the way you conduct yourself or what you see out there within your organisation or within your team, and if you're not willing to call it out or put a stop to it or have those have conversations, then it's essentially your standard. So I just really wanted to sort of give that a plug because that's one that I'm working through, and I also it's a little bit trickier in the political environment with councillors who are individually elected, but that's something that I'm also trying to implement in the space there. And finally, courageous conversations. So we should all be willing to have courageous conversations, and just as importantly, people should be able and feel willing to have a courageous conversation with you. So if things aren't going right or you're missing the boat, people should be able to have the confidence to come and speak to you, and they're not going to get their head bitten off. Finally, so I think that's pretty much my time. I just want to say that obviously with COVID, there is so much uncertainty out there in our communities, and here in the Hut it's no different. I think we've been a little bit insulated versus some of our other city counterparts in other areas, just because we have quite a diverse economy and so forth. But we know that it really is going to hit as time moves on, particularly in the economic space. While we focus and we're concerned about that, we also need to make sure that we focus on the opportunities as well. And I mean, I've been it's been really awesome and heartening to visit so many local businesses where I am, who are adapting, who are changing, and who are actually seeking out those opportunities. Of course, that's not possible for everyone in every sector, but it's something we should always be encouraging as leaders. Because if we focus on the negative too much, the negative will happen. If we focus on the positive and the opportunities, the positive is more likely to happen, or at least we're going to lessen the blow of the negative. So I just want to really encourage that as we go through some uncertain times. But thank you for listening. I hope that was interesting. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
much for that. Really inspiring, some of those insights and your honesty. I really appreciate it. I love what you had to say about your own sort of identity crisis. I think you put it when you first started. How were you supposed to act? It was fascinating stuff. But also some of your advice, being yourself, the importance of being authentic, mentorship. And of course, I love what you said about avoiding micromanagement to build trust, and at the end there, those courageous conversations. Now, I can see that there are questions coming in. Helen, Tegan, Tim, thank you for your questions here on the main stage, but you'll have an opportunity to ask them directly to the Mayor now. So, Mayor Barry, if you could head over to sessions now. And to everybody that does have a question, also click the sessions on the tab on the left of your screen. Mayor Barry will be over there in the group to answer either live via video. Please do share your video. We'd love to see you sharing your video, but otherwise just type your questions in the chat, and Mayor Barry will answer them. Now we can see there's quite a few coming in during the presentation, so all head over to sessions now for that 10 or 15 minute Q&A. We'll look forward to that. Don't forget, our next presentation will be here on the main stage, probably shortly after 10 hours. Obviously, Mayor Barry's presentation went on a little longer than expected, so we'll see you in roughly 10 minutes for leadership expert Nick Friedel.